Okay, it's on. Welcome, everybody. We're so thrilled to have so many of you who've joined us today. My name is Jay Bassell. I'm the Director of Marketing at Equipment Zone. As is the case, I am usually surrounded by much smarter people than myself. First and foremost, Terry Combs, as well as Roy Hughesman. Terry is one of our senior sales reps and trainers, and Roy is a senior technician, also trainer and setup specialist. Both of these gentlemen have years and years and years of experience. Um, but we are thrilled to have an important topic. This comes up all the time. It's an evolving art form and science, and there are so many variables. I just want to start off by saying a couple of things. One, we are going to probably have a lot of chat and a lot of dialogue. We will try as best we can to address some of those questions. If we don't address your question, you are welcome to specifically try to reach out to us after the fact. If it's something that's involved with a technical issue, you can also start a tech ticket on our website or call the support line at Equipment Zone. So if there's something that's a little bit more technical, not just like, you know, a measurement issue, please reach out to us. And then also be aware that everything we discuss today is going to be under the umbrella of experience and our preferences, and they will be tempered by your relationship with your client, because ultimately it's the customer who is going to probably dictate some of the ideas here and some of the concepts. And I know Terry is going to do a great job explaining that, as is Roy. But I thought I'd start off this webinar when we talk about placement, we talk about images, and we talk about sizing. We have to always keep a seat open for what the client expects. Now, of course, we're going to give you kind of the rule of thumb. We're going to give you our preferences and our experiences and what is, I don't want to say normal, but what is the accustomed situation and maybe best practices. Would that be fair to say, Terry? Have I gone too far there?
No, you're exactly right, Jay. And this is something that that I always talk to my classes about. Not only am I involved in direct to garment, but I teach screen printing classes as well. But positioning of an image is really in the eye of the beholder, and sometimes it's in the eye of your customer. But a couple of things that we want to talk about here is you definitely want to have continuity, consistency of your positioning, especially within a single print run, because if you have that family reunion and you're going everywhere from a 2T to a 4X for Uncle Bob, you want to have the positioning so that all those larges are printed in the same place. All those extra larges are printing in the same place, because the minute that you start kind of drifting this way and that way on your image size, that is always the picture that gets taken and printed in the newspaper of the family reunion. And you look at that and you say, I don't know what's wrong with that picture, but something's wrong with that picture.
Something's a little off right there. Yeah, it's not just Uncle Bob. There's something.
Exactly. Exactly. But Jay, and I come at this all from a production management background. I've run production floors with as many as 75 production floor employees. So I'm sure people listening right now are just cringing, going, "Oh my gosh, the two I have drive me crazy." Yes, multiply that, double, or not double, multiply that by 35.
Multiples. Right.
but my point here is, we as decorators, we can probably eyeball this ourselves and get that really great print, but hopefully your plan is to hire someone and hire someone else and hire someone else and buy another machine and hire someone else. And then you have to have that consistency from that your employees are using. And Jay, unlike screen printing, Jay and Roy, unlike screen printing, where if I'm printing 100 shirts, I'm probably going to print them on one press, so it's pretty easy to stay consistent. Mm-hmm. We have many customers that have 2, 3, 5 direct-to-garment printers, so if they have a big order, they're probably running those on all those machines, which means you have to have machine 1, machine 4. You have to be positioning that graphic in the same place. And your first thought is, well, if you save the file the same, and Roy's going to demonstrate this for us, you also have to load the shirts the same. That, you know, some people might put the collar an inch over, and some people have the collar right on the edge of the platen. Well, that's going to change the position. But you know, my whole point, and sorry to belabor, you just said, hey, I'd make my point.
You're doing a great setup. This is perfect. What I hope you would say.
But you know, and here's a pro tip for everybody out there that's planning to have employees someday, and start now. I have, every one of my employees had a graphic placement guide in their hand. And a lot of the pages were blank. It's just a picture of the front of a t-shirt, picture of the back of the t-shirt, a short sleeve and a long sleeve, and an area to write notes. And if there was a graphic that maybe a standard graphic, and just, you know, have a meeting, okay, our standard 10 by 12 graphic, this is where we're positioning that, and you can make a note and you can draw in there 2 inches or whatever. For kind of oddball things, you have blank pages to kind of write those in. So if that customer comes back, you can go to your guide and say, okay, here we are. But these are the types of things that help us so that we're not stopping production. And I'm a big don't ever stop production guy. Yes, absolutely. If there's a question, stop. But placement shouldn't be the question. Every time one of your employees gets an order, they shouldn't have to come to you and say, okay, so here or here, like this or like that.
Right.
No, they should be able to take a look at their guide or whatever you have. Maybe it's a laminated wall poster. That Roy could talk to you about how to actually print that and get it laminated. but they should be able to look at that and say, okay, this is the position I'm going to. Now we're going to talk about some kind of oddball things as well. But here's another pro tip. When you're starting out doing this and you say, okay, well, Roy and Terry said position it like this, print your size first, put it on, and go look at yourself in the mirror, because the positioning that you want to use might be at half an inch lower than what I might use. Maybe it's a half inch higher than what Roy would do. But take a look at it in the mirror to start getting a feel for where proper positioning is. So
100%, 100%.
Yeah.
I think you've hit on so many great points there, Terry, for our opening. Whoops. You talked about consistency several times, and I think that's just invaluable. You talked about, we used to call it a GPG, garment placement guide. That's exactly what we called it. And we had, you know, several of our consistent runs that we were running every week or multiple times in a month. Those types of things we wanted to make sure were easily accessible. But every job has a story. Every job has notes. And if you ever repeat that order, especially with DTG printing, you know, you need to keep the notes. You need to keep the history. What did we do? Why did we do it that way? So that if you get that repeat order, which is where the gravy is, you want to make sure that you can deliver that consistency. That's what you mentioned. So
you
I'm
know, Jay,
excited.
and
Oh,
let
sorry,
me
go
add
ahead.
one more thing.
Yep.
One great thing about doing DTG is, and again, Roy's gonna talk about this, but if you load your shirt exactly the same in the same position every single time, and you've saved that previous file, well, that positioning has been saved as well. So it's really easy to hit your mark again with DTG, as opposed to a lot of, well, most other types of garment decorating.
100% agree. And since you were dropping some knowledge bombs and pro tips, I'd like to also have one, which is if you have a shop, and even if you don't have a shop, if you have a garage or a spare bedroom, wherever you're operating, I highly recommend that you have examples and samples of common print placements so that you can share with your audience, with your client, with your future customers. This is what I mean when I say left chest, right chest, center back, full back. And you literally have things that are printed out. I also would recommend that you use your logo for a little extra branding magic on top, but nevertheless, have those samples ready. That way you don't have to keep printing samples again. And also so that you can say, this is how our shop runs. This is how that we can ensure consistency, whether it's myself or whether it's Roy or whether it's Terry printing. This is our formula and this is where your logo is going to land. Are you okay with that, Bob? Turn the volume up.
Yours.
Oh, okay. Now you tell me. Okay.
I think you sound fine.
Okay, great. I think it's just our air conditioning, but so that you can have that consistency. That was really the pro tip that I wanted to share. So having said all of that, here's what we did in preparation. And thanks again for the large numbers that have tuned in today. Yes, we are recording the session and it will be available on our YouTube channel. but also we got together before to figure out some of the most common situations, the top 5, I would say, most common questions about sizing and placement. And so I'm going to advance the slide just for a second, and then Roy's going to jump in. I'd love it if you guys could kind of go back and forth. I'll ask the question, and then you can both give your position and your ideas and your answers. But as I do this, think about this. This was we're not picking on anybody, by the way. We're not trying to make anyone feel odd or awkward. The result of this webinar is the direct questions we have been getting on our Facebook F2100 group site. So if you haven't joined us there, please, you're all welcome, especially if you're in the United States. We occasionally make some exceptions for fantastic guests, but we try to keep it to the US just so that we're in the same time zone and everybody speaks English. So having said that, please join us on Facebook. But because of the content that we get and the questions that we get, whether it's myself or Terry or Amy or Roy or Joey or somebody in New Jersey answering questions, we oftentimes get these questions and we're like, oh, that would make a great webinar series or a great webinar presentation. So this is one that started the dialogue with us. This picture, as you can see, I don't know who the gentleman is, and but what we do see quickly is that the A in aqua and the T in sprout are not very visible. So from this picture, we have been doing a lot of work behind the scenes to talk about, well, what about the positioning? Well, what about the sizing? Well, how do we ensure consistency? Well, what if it's a pocket? Well, what if it's an adult versus a youth versus and all of that came together for today. So again, this isn't to highlight anything wrong. If you've never done it before and somebody told you that the full imprint width is 14 inches wide and you grab a medium or a large, you might have this issue. Would that be fair to say, Terry and Roy?
Yep, definitely.
Yeah, or Ryan Moore's famous medium, where he brags about being somewhere between a small and a medium.
Well,
but
even Ryan would not want the graphic going under.
Well, the great thing about that Facebook group is that people can post pictures like that and talk about them and have a positive conversation about, hey, here's what I did wrong.
Yeah, right. And I do want to reinforce that it is a very active, very positive group. So shout out to everybody who's contributing and helping. That was the whole point of the group, was there are going to be odd times during the weekends or during holidays or just, early mornings, late afternoons, whenever, when you just want to ask, hey, has anybody else gone through this, or has anybody else struggled with this? Or, we don't want it to be, it's never a negative bashing kind of a feel. It's always a positive support kind of a feel. So
I know both you guys, Roy and Jay, spend lots of time there, and which we all appreciate. And we don't allow any of the woe is me people,
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, actually, reiterating on what Jay said, we definitely don't want it to be a situation where we're bullying somebody else because they don't know something.
Yeah.
And that has happened from time to time. So fair warning, if you are one of those people, we will drop you.
We're okay with strong opinions, but let's be positive and be support
Exactly.
each other, cheerlead each other. Let's have a victory. The rising tide raises all ships, as is the cliche. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys a little bit. Why don't we start with some of the positioning questions, and one of the top ones.
You want to show the chart that we made?
We can show the chart. Is that what you'd like to do first? Okay, let's do that.
Yeah, we also made a chart that you can request from us. Awesome. Actually, Terry and Amy will have access to it to get it over to you.
Yeah, so perfect point, Roy. Thanks for keeping me on task here. So this is something that Roy has spent a lot of time on. So I'm going to let you speak about it, Roy.
Okay, well, first off, we do go back and forth on this. I've never taken the time to create a chart, but there was someone in the same Facebook group on that one design, because when you're looking at the design on the Platen, you don't realize that it's going to wrap around somebody's body, okay? And that their arms are going to actually cover part of the artwork. So when it goes from your Platen to the customer and they put it on, that's when you realize where you're at, okay? So we did have a customer that posted a chart, but there was some modifications we made to it and changed some positioning and stuff to be more pertinent to the Garment Creator software. and how we're going to show you to load the garments, okay? To be consistent, to try to keep the chef mentality out of the process, okay? Because when the chef's sick or not there, or you're too busy and you need multiples, you need to have a system. We're manufacturing a product. We need to go from step to step to step. And if I'm gone and someone else comes in, they follow the same procedure. And every time I output something for every customer based on a certain scenario, it's all going to be the same. Okay,
Perfect.
so
Roy, one thing, GC on the chart is referencing garment creator. So if you see
that's
in the
correct.
chart GC, those two letters refer to garment creator, the software. And also the chart will be made available if you can reach out to Terry or Amy or Jeff. Their emails will be at the final slide, so that, you know, hang on till then if you don't already know their emails. And each of them will have a copy of this, and you can reach them directly and ask them for this copy. So I know some people were like, hey, you didn't leave it up long enough. I was trying to take a picture and memorize it and write notes. We'd be happy to send it to you. Okay. So
Mhm.
having said that, Roy, was there something else that you were, I interrupted you, so forgive me.
No, there was nothing else. Just wanted to cover that first because that is pertinent to how I'm going to start showing you how to load. Now, everyone that has the 2100, I know some of you have 32 or 3070s or even 2000s. The 2100 does have a QR code here that has a video to show you how to load two ways. One with the grip pad, which most people don't put on and they're reluctant to for various reasons. Okay, I can talk about that briefly, but a lot of people will use the frame. The frame is more time consuming and brings down production. The biggest aspect of the 2000 to the 2100 as far as production goes is the 2100 allows you to print at lower resolutions on your color and allowing some better output on your white bases, okay, giving you faster production and better quality prints in that instance, okay? I'm not gonna bag on the 2000 because the 2000 prints high quality, they only go fast and faster, okay?
That's a
As,
great way
as
to
far
put
as
it.
quality ways on the 2000. Now with the 2100, I can crank that down with higher quality garments and get faster production with a lower resolution, okay, faster output. So the other thing that increased production is the grip pad, okay, loading with the grip pad. I can load with the grip pad in a matter of seconds, just like you're loading on a silkscreen press. It's very easy to do. The arm sticks out, you slide the shirt over, you got the adhesive to grab the fabric, and you go to the next one, the next one, the next one. So it's easy to keep up with. So those are the two ways that you can load. Both videos are available on YouTube. You can watch them. They are very slow. They're like turtles loading the shirt. So keep in mind when you're watching it, it's just because they want everyone to be able to see at their own pace on how to load the shirt correctly, okay? The other thing is, well, brain freeze on that.
The other thing is that
when
Roy,
it comes to, yeah,
you did a fabulous
using the
job.
grip pad, there are some people that will thread the shirts and they're reluctant to use it because they'll get white ink through the fabric. That's for another day, another topic, in another webinar. If you're getting white to penetrate through the fabric, you're doing something wrong on the pre-treat side. You're adding too much white ink, not enough pre-treat, not cured properly. So we're going to have a troubleshooting webinar eventually where we can go through, if this happened, how do you cure it? And we're going to have samples and we'll be able to do some things live. But I don't want to take up too much time on that. What I'd like to do, unless you have any other questions or something you want to cover real quick, is I'm going to go through each placement scenario and how I would load the shirt, how I would pre-treat the shirt.
Perfect. But Roy, before we do that, let's give Terry a little bit of space here to talk something about determining that left chest position, or determining, you know, how far down. I'd like people to hear from him because of the experience, 30 plus years running production shops, whether it was, all apparel decorators have their preferences or have their rules of thumb, but I'd love it if, Terry, you could cover maybe for a few minutes and then go back to Roy and have him do some demonstrating live. Is that okay? Did I put you guys on the spot there?
No, that's
No.
great.
That's perfect.
Okay.
That's perfect. Well, Jay, one of the things we talked about was the left chest prints. In fact, I think that was the first one that came up because we've all seen those really bad left chest locations. In fact, I was back at Ohio University a couple of years ago to go to a football game with my nieces and nephew, and we went in the bookstore, and there was a really cool shirt there that had a left chest print, and one of them said, "Hey, I'm thinking about buying this shirt." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, look at that placement of that print. Just put it on." And they're like, "Oh, holy crap, it's down here." But
it's a left rib placement.
it's like a very, very cool tattoo. But here's my rule of thumb for left chest. From the bottom of the sleeve, there's an invisible line across the shirt. From the seam to our imaginary center line, I'm going to go center of that. I'm going to go about 2 inches up from that bottom of the sleeve across to the center. I'm going to go about 2 inches up for that left chest print. Now, we've all seen the left chest prints that are huge or very tall. Then I'm going to go down as far as on that line of the bottom of the sleeve across that imaginary line, if it's a really tall left chest print. But a lot of left chests are just, a couple of lines of type or a line of type or a very small logo. So then I'm probably going to go up about 2 inches from that imaginary line. Do you want me to keep going on different locations, Jay?
Yeah, hold on. I do, but I noticed Roy had a really important some feedback because he's also apparel geek like all of us, and he watches the trends. And so Roy had a comment in our show prep about, maybe here's what Nike's doing, or here's what some other manufacturer is doing. So Roy, what have you seen in terms of that left chest placement?
Well, basically, left chest placement, there's 3 things that I would look at. One is exactly what Terry's talking about, your traditional placement. With Nike and Under Armour, with their logos, they're placing them higher on the chest. Okay, so that's something to consider if you're trying to be trendy with your design, what have you. The third would be, is there a pocket? Do I want my logo in the pocket on the top portion of the pocket, or do I want it above the pocket? If you actually lower your camera there, that is an above the pocket logo, I believe, on Terry's shirt.
It's above the
He's got
pocket.
a pocket just
Yes,
below
he does.
It is.
But you can actually place a logo on that top seam area of your pocket as well, which people may do on certain shirts as well.
Very good. That's perfect. Why don't we go to that, Terry, if you can, since Roy brought up the pocket. That was not in order, but it is on our list. And so we get that question. That's pretty much the next question as well.
Roy's on a high wire without notes. So
yeah, exactly. I got him hanging off the TV over here.
Yeah. No notes, no net. Well, yeah, and pocket printing, and just like Roy said, there's the option of printing physically on the pocket. There's the option of printing above the pocket, and I know Roy's going to demonstrate how to use mouse pad material to aid in this process, but typically I try to avoid any stitching on the pocket when I'm doing the print, because usually if there's stitching, there's also kind of a thick, thin area. So I want to try to decorate below that stitching if I can, but I want to be within 3/4 of an inch to an inch from the top edge of the pocket if I'm on the pocket. And again, I'm going to let Roy show how to do that. If I'm printing above the pocket, I'm going to be about 3/4 inches above that top pocket line. Now, here's the trick, right? Where we no longer make these garments in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So sometimes that pocket's a little bit crooked. So what do? Generally, what we do is we'll still square the print with the top line of the pocket, because if we make it perfectly square with our platen, by gosh, this shirt, this pocket's not sewn on straight, but my print's going to be straight. Well, then it looks like there's something wrong with the print. So you want to line up with that top edge of the pocket. And I don't know, Roy, is this a point where you want to show that the lining up, or do you want to wait till the end to do that?
Well, I'll go ahead and do all of them in a row. That way it's
Okay.
easier to
Oh, yeah,
just keep
perfect.
up and keep pace.
Sure. Okay.
Perfect.
So there's
I
a
thought
few
since you
different
jumped ahead
placement
that
scenarios, and I'll just go boom, boom, boom. Okay.
He's got it lined up. He's got it in the queue.
And then we'll get to the software placement after we talk about the garment placement.
Okay.
And I think it's important to remind folks, we do have that guide that we're happy to let you see. I know, Terry, you referenced some imaginary lines and 2 inches up from here and so on and so forth. So maybe one more time for the left chest, for those that are listening, where would you hit that? What is the sweet spot? How would you describe that one more time?
The on your average garment, the line from where the bottom of the sleeve is all the way across, that's my baseline that I'm going to use. For most of the images that I'm going to do left chest, I'm going to center that graphic between the sleeve stitching and the center of that shirt. I'm going to bring that graphic up about 2 inches from that line, basically about 2 inches from the bottom of the sleeve. Does that make sense? Have I said it properly?
Yep, perfect. You nailed it.
Again, that's going to vary depending on the size of your graphic. And those are the kind of notes that you'll make in your graphic placement guide.
And I would say those are also the kinds of things that you should pre-print a sample with your logo and test that so that you can dial that in. And I can't wait for Roy to share this, because he's going to show you that once you do this and you load it in Garment Creator, that you can save that. So it'll avoid some of that guesswork after the fact. So good job, guys. You nailed it. So we've covered the left chest positioning. And by the way, it's okay if you want it on the right side too, kids. So it's,
Jay, a lot of people use shirts today that are logoed. They've got, the Adidas logo or something here on the left side. So you see a lot of coaches, in fact,
absolutely.
And the school logo will be on here, right chest. It's exactly the same, just flipped around.
So imagine that baseline going all the way across from sleeve to sleeve. And then there's your baseline to work from, so that if you have personalization, a name, or a second logo, that you can line those up and make sure that there is some alignment there, because it'll look really awkward and be very visible. So how far down from the shirt collar? We get this question all the time. And you know what, Roy, I owe you another apology. I should have said this in the beginning. I just want to give a shout out to Roy. Roy spends probably somewhere between 30 minutes to as much as an hour, literally, and I'm not exaggerating, going through this with each of our customers when they first buy an F2100 or an F3070 from us. He spends that time making sure that they understand the process of loading the shirt, how far down and why. So Roy, good job to you, man. You are invaluable. We appreciate you so much. And if you haven't purchased from us, that's what you missed out on. You missed out on that training. So now we're going to give you kind of the Cliff Notes version, or the Roy Notes version. And of course, Terry, you too, jump in. What is this? What is this? 3 fingers, 2 fingers, 4 fingers? What are we talking about?
Everybody's got different size fingers.
Well, luckily I still have 4 of mine, but is it 2 fingers down, 1, 3? I don't know.
Well, basically, I would like to just revert to Garment Creator. I do see sometimes when I'm helping customers, and if I log in remotely, they have their grid turned off. That's the most important thing of Garment Creator. You could turn off your outside frame, the teal, or you could take the shirt away, because the shirt is just a reference of it being a shirt. The position inside Garment Creator of where that shirt is in reference to the actual grid pattern is not the way you're going to be loading the shirts, because you'll be way too far down. Okay. The other thing is there is a margin on the platen. The platens are actually, if you take a tape measure, and this is every platen, this one's 14/16, but it's actually 14.5 by 16.5 from edge to edge inside of where the frame is. Okay. So I've already got to remove a 1/2 inch, so 1/4 inch on each side, top, bottom, both left and right. It's not going to print outside that area. In fact, I tell customers, stay at least a 1/16 of an inch inside of your grid on Garment Creator, because you will cut off your image. So that is one thing. Did you want to cover something else? on that
No, just
before I
maybe,
start loading the shirts and showing that
yeah,
stuff?
one thing, we'll flip it back over to Terry. So Terry, what
Okay.
is this, an old school screen printing carryover? One finger,
You,
two fingers, how far
you know,
down?
and Jay, I still hear it all the time. I've heard it as long as I've been in screen printing. Well, you need to print that down 3 fingers. You need to print that down 4 fingers. But as Cheryl Crow shared with us in a song, you're letting those matches burn down to those thick fingers. Everybody's fingers are different. So my rule of thumb on a full front image, and by the way, a full front image for the most part is about 10 inches by 12 inches. That is standard in the industry. And when people question me on that, I say, go to your t-shirt drawer, because we all have one, right? And measure the images and tell me if they don't fit within 10 by 12. And because most of them do. Now,
Would you say 80% of the time that's the case? Or?
Easily.
Yeah.
And that's the folks that say, well, I definitely need that 16 by 20 Platen. Hey, if you're printing for NASCAR or you're doing some kind of fashion prints that need to be that big, yeah, knock yourself out. But that's the reason the printer comes with a 14 by 16 Platen, because most images fit within that 10 by 12 size. So for a full front image, my rule of thumb, and again, yours can be a little different than mine. This is just a starting point, but I go 2 inches down from the collar, from the inside seam, not the outside of the collar, but where the collar is attached to the shirt. I go 2 inches down for there. Now, what about that horizontal print? I'm going to go down about 3 inches on that horizontal print to make it fit. You know, I also wanted to point out, because I see people doing this, they might have maybe there's a graphic and it's a Seattle graphic and it's got all this stuff that's basically within that 10 by 12 square. But it's got the Space Needle over here that sticks up about 1.5 inches. Well, don't use the top of the Space Needle as that 2-inch area, because the graphic, people are going to look at it and go, there's something wrong with that print. So maybe I'm going 2 inches down from to the bulk of that graphic, but maybe the Space Needle sticking up a little bit over here. That would be outside of the normal area. So you kind of have to take into account odd sized images. Our friend Mike over at Potato Chimps, one of the greatest company names ever. But he sent me a shirt a long time ago. It was a Walking Dead shirt. It wasn't a trademark infringement. It was anyway.
We get it. We're good. We're all clear.
But it was a very, very tall image. So of course he had to go up a little bit, because if he went down 2 inches and that tall image, all of a sudden that image is getting tucked in your pants, if you are that person who tucks their t-shirt into their pants. But so you have to, these are not hard and fast rules, not set in stone. And while we're talking about this, let me talk just for a minute about sweatshirts, like crew neck sweatshirts. A crew neck sweatshirt has more surface area, and not only surface area to print, but visually to the eye, more surface area. So I commonly on a crew neck, I'm going to start an image down about 3 inches instead of 2 inches, just so that when you look at it, it doesn't look like the graphic is jammed into the top of that sweatshirt. We talked I didn't really touch on back prints, but if I go down 2 inches on the front of a shirt, I want to go down 4 inches on the back of the shirt. Or if you go down 1.5 inches, I want you to go down 3.5 on the back. And the reason for that is the collar on the back is much higher than the collar on the front. If you do a front and back print, and you'd go 2 inches down in the front, 2 inches down in the back, someone's going to look at that shirt when you turn around going, well, that back print doesn't look like it fits with the front print. So, my rule of thumb is if it has a front print, you hold that shirt up and imagine you're looking through that shirt. That back print should be positioned in the same place on the shirt as the front print, so that when somebody turns around, you see that continuity. Then it's kind of the same thing with sweatshirts. You don't commonly see them with a front and back print, but hoodies, and I'll end with this. Hoodies, there's generally a muff pocket on a hoodie. So what you want to do is really center that graphic between the muff pocket and the top collar, never below center, maybe a little bit above center, but to the eye, you want that graphic centered again between the muff pocket and the collar.
So that's good. That's good info. And I would add to Terry, I've seen a lot of folks make this mistake. I personally think it is a mistake. Speaking of hoodies and speaking of printing on the back of the hoodies, remember the hood. The hoodie is going to lay down most of the time. It's not always going to be up and on. So remember the placement of the graphic so that you're not covering the graphic. People are paying for advertising. You want to be able to make sure that that's visible. So,
but hey, knock yourself out printing on the sides of that hood and
absolutely
and things like that
print
as well.
on the hood, print on the side of the hood, print on, hashtag easy for me, something like that.
I have one more thing to mention, and that is youth shirts. And commonly I'll go down 1 inch from the collar on a youth size garment.
Gotcha. So I'm glad that you gave some inches, and I'm glad that we still have the guide here. I printed mine out. So folks, you'll be able to get a copy of this. And that's kind of what we've started is the placement talks about the starting point, like the top of the design should be a 1/2 inch below the bottom of the collar, the bottom of the collar seam, that kind of referencing. And that's specific for t-shirts. We're sorry we couldn't get into all of the variables for all of the products. We just wanted to be able to cover at least those in terms of an infant, a toddler, a youth, and an adult size a shirt. So and I love what you said, that it's the rule of thumb. It's a best practice thing, and you're going to have to make sure that it's in line with what your production team needs and what your client expects. So there will always be variables, like somebody just brought up a V-neck, and those are the kinds of things that you have to figure out. What about women's V-necks versus men's V-necks? There are shape differences. There are anatomical issues to consider. Can I say that? Does everybody know what I mean when I say that? So now, having said that, everybody's fingers are different thicknesses. So let's stop with the fingers. Let's get back to measurements, either in inches or centimeters. We live in the US, we're rebels. We're going to stick with we're not fans of the metric system for some reason. One of the things that I love about Roy is he's always got that measuring tape, and he's always going over there and he's measuring shirts, because that's the best way to get that consistency. Wouldn't you say, Roy?
Yeah, exactly. If you have a tape measure and you know your Platen and how it's going to print, then placement in Garment Creator is a breeze. If you're a large shop and have multiple users, I've been at a shop before that does online sales, and they have a multitude of printers, like 30, 40 printers. And every printer has at least 80 to 100 layout settings, depending on what they're printing on. So if you're doing, some of them do pillowcases, tea towels, t-shirts, hoodies, fronts, backs, whatever, they can actually go in and they have it set up to where the person picks the setting. It's also saved, and the placement in the layout is also saved, and everything coincides with the way the images are. That's the key. If you don't save your images correctly from the start, then there's going to be a problem. And I'll show you that in a couple of the images that I have that I'm going to bring up in Garment Creator. What is the correct way to save an image as far as how much room to allow? There should be no room, okay? Your image and your artboard size or page size should be identical. So the way Garment Creator places your art, sizes your art, it's based on artboard or page size, depending on the program. So if my artwork is right at the edge of my artboard size and I say 12 inches wide, it's going to make it 12 inches. If I have a 1/2 inch on either side or whatever, it could be a little over a half, a little under a half on one side and a little over half on the other. Now I got a centering position issue. I know in some of the program, it's basically a command where you can actually bring in your page or artboard size directly to the edge of the artwork and then save it at that time. Okay, so keep that in mind. First thing you got to do, consistent on that end. Then when you bring it into Garment Creator has your layout settings, which makes it consistent within the program. And then it's placing your shirts the same way every time, whether it's you or, one of 10 or 15 employees. You're going to get the same result, same position every single time. So again,
Well,
we're manufacturing a product. We're not baking a cake with, a chef saying a pinch here, a pinch there kind of scenario.
got to
Okay,
keep the recipes. You got to keep those recipes. Roy, we've got
that's
about
right.
15, maybe 20 minutes. So I want to make sure that you have the time necessary to show that relationship between Garment Creator and the grid in Garment Creator and the Platen and get to the live printing. So
Okay,
let's turn it over to you. And we're not trying to shorten the clock at all, but we just want to be, use our time wisely. So
you
take
got
it
it.
away, Roy.
You got it. So first thing I want to start out with, and this is what I do when I train people, how am I going to hold my garment? Okay. I want to figure out and do it the same way. We know the collar's never perfectly centered. Okay. It could be off a little bit if you measure from the sleeve to this edge of the collar. It's never perfectly round. Tag's never perfectly in the center. So forget about looking at that. The thing I do know is that my sleeves and my shoulder position are going to be consistent, most consistent. So I center the shirt on my body. Okay. And when I walk up to each device, I center my body in front of each device. So if I start out here, just moving the camera here a little bit, okay, at my pre-treat machine. And if you don't have a pre-treater, that's fine, okay? What I want to make sure when I'm pre-treating is I get the proper area first off. So I tell people, hey, if you can't afford to buy a pre-treater, get a tub and create a box like this that you can place your shirt on and have an area that you're going to be filling with pre-treat, okay? Something that you can visually see. I'm only going to be going this far down, or I'm going to go full-size design, or I'm just doing a logo. I can see almost positioning on the shirt as well when I place it that way. The other thing is making sure the shirt is straight. So if it's centered on my body, okay, and I place it on the pre-treat machine, I always overthrow my shirts. Then when I slide them forward, they're straightening out automatically. I pull them right up to the edge of the collar right here. And then all I have to do is center the tail of the shirt and then tuck everything in and then go ahead. And when I pre-treat, this is what I want to cover with you. You're always up towards the collar, going to be light on pre-treat, okay? So right up in this front 1-inch edge, it's kind of spattery a little bit. All
Roy, can you
machines
show that
are
with
going to
the
have a
camera?
similar effect. What was that?
Can you pull that camera in a little bit closer to show
Yeah, I
that?
can.
Just, yeah, so people get it. There you go. So what you're
Okay.
saying is the spray on the pre-treater is going to go up to the edge, but where it may be the least consistent would be right on that edge, correct?
Exactly, right there. So I'm going to get an uneven print if I try to print up that high, which I'm never going to do anyway. So, but that's the first thing is I want to get pre-treat as high as possible on the shirt. And then the next thing is obviously placement on the heat press. Same thing, centering the shirt, walking straight up, because if I get a perfect square and the square is aligned properly, then it's going to be easier to mount the shirt on the printer. So then I'm going to go ahead and press it. Same situation as I'm pressing all the way up to the collar, but not the collar. Okay. The only time I'm going to deviate from that, what I just showed you, is if I'm going to print a specialty logo up higher on the shirt. Okay. This right here is going to be in the area of where the front collar is. Okay. With that back design. So I'm going to pre-treat much higher than I would on the back side of the shirt. So when I'm loading the back shirt, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm using the front collar as my position. Okay, when I typically pre-treat the back shirt, I'm going right up to the edge of the front collar that's showing through. Okay, but when I'm doing it to do something like this, I'm going to bring the shirt all the way up. And then I'm going to pre-treat beyond up to this actual collar up here, which is going to require me to thread the shirt on the heat press. Okay, if I want to do something like that. And also it's going to require me to thread it on the printer itself.
And I want the folks that are listening right now to understand that the reason Roy did that graphic is we've been seeing a lot of the trends of a center back print that's smaller, like 3-4 inches, and it's higher up, and it might be you know, a sponsor logo, or it might be a hashtag and not a full design. So that's why we also wanted to show you that.
If I'm going to pre-treat, I mean, cure this pre-treat now, I'm going to throw the shirt up here and I'm going to thread it and pull it all the way up. Okay. This is the only time I'm going to deviate from my traditional, making sure that my collar is my point where I'm going to have the shirt hang over, whether it's the front or the back. Okay. Then when I print this design on the printer, I'm going to do the same thing. I'll be threading it, okay, on here as well. And I'm going to pull it down. Make sure my tag's out of the way. But what I'm going to do when I do that is I typically allow for 1 inch. In the video on Epson, they do show a different amount. Okay, but I find that 1 inch is the perfect amount, because what does that tell me? I know that 1 inch is dead space because I didn't have the right amount of pre-treat that got up that far. It's sprayed, it's spotty. Okay, so I want to make sure that I'm pulling the shirt down far enough to alleviate any issue that I may have by going up too far into that area, because I know it's not going to print properly. So I alleviate that from that. So now at this point, then I just worry about from the edge of the artwork to the edge of the print, which here is about 1/2 inch. So it's really 1.5 inches down from the collar to the start of the print roughly. Okay, if that makes sense. Printing on the back of the shirt. But typically, excuse me, when I'm printing on the back of the shirt, okay, this is how I would load the print on the back of the shirt. Okay, so you can see where that print is, and as Terry was mentioning, this is a little bit more than 3 fingers down to about where the print starts. But if I'm roughly loading the shirt on Garment Creator, I typically on the back of a shirt go about 1 inch down. So if I have my collar right here at the edge on the front, okay, let me bring the camera in closer so you can see that. Okay, you can see that right at the edge. I'm going to still pull that 1 inch forward because that also is dead space. Then I'm going to go 1 inch down typically on the back of the shirt for my artwork. Okay, and that roughly, based on me wearing shirts all the time, just like you guys, position again is a matter of preference. Okay, my positioning, your positioning, these are just starting points, and whatever is more comfortable for you is great. But what I'm finding is based on my position, it puts you right at the shoulder blades right here, which from the collar down is about where you want your image to be. Okay, so depending on the size of the shirt as well. I mean, if this is a 5X, I may have to go down a little bit more because you have more curvature on a larger person than you're going to on a smaller person. Okay, so then as far as a front shirt, how I'm going to load the front shirt on the printer. And I'm going to show you 2 ways to load this. One is using the grip pad. one is using the frame, okay? If I were in production, and this is what I tell customers, when you're starting out, and you're new, you've just bought this whole setup, and you're like, I'm going into business. It's gonna take you an 8-hour day to do 100 shirts, easy, okay? Because you're gonna be taking your time, making sure every step in the process is correct. Now, if I do 100 shirts, I could probably get them done in 6 hours, even if I'm doing multiple different designs, okay? If I'm doing the same design and just hit a print and 100, I could probably get them done faster depending on the size of the design. If it's something like this, I'm at the mercy of the printer, okay? To actually wait for it to print and how much time it's gonna take to print that, okay? So when I'm gonna do this shirt, I'm gonna load it this way, pull the shirt forward, right to the edge of the collar and pull it about 1 inch forward. It's centered because I'm standing in the center. There's actually an arrow right here on the platen to show you where your center point is. Then I grab the tail end and I straighten it left to right. Okay, and if I do that every time, now that's where with the grip pad you have your hockey puck, or I like to use my hands if you're in an environment where it's climate controlled, it's cool, you can use your hands, but if your hands are sweaty, don't let them come in contact with the shirt, okay? The only time I'm gonna deviate from this, again, is if I'm printing a design high up on the back, or if I am printing on a V-neck, a plunging neckline for a woman's or a men's cut, whichever, I'm gonna put the collar right at the edge. So I have more control to bring the image up. And sometimes the images may be up higher on one side than the other, depending on the position. But again, getting back to what Terry had mentioned earlier. Now, if I'm loading this using the frame, okay, and there's no grip pad involved, okay, I have to load it like this, just like I did before, straighten it out, and then I'm gonna put the frame down. Now, as I do this, it bunches the fabric up all the way around. And this is where I see a lot of people start messing with their reduced white area. I've only changed it 3 times in 4 years. So keep that in mind. Most of the issues with the reduced white, if you see a white outer perimeter on 1 or 2 sides of your print, you've overstretched your fabric. Okay, what happens is when the white ink goes down, that wetness relaxes the fabric, allows it to stretch a little bit more, and now you got a white line showing on 1 or 2 sides. So once I put the frame on, even in the video, it shows you the guy going down like this, pulling it, making sure you're stretching it, okay? And then what I tell customers, if you're using your frame, lift it up about 1/2 inch, drop it down, and then go ahead and print. That will allow the fabric, if it's overstretched in one area to where it's distorting the fabric, that it will relax it enough to allow for no white line, okay? So keep that in mind, and then you can go ahead and hit print on that. Any questions on that one?
We had a question about the female attendings being struggling to concentrate with you wearing shorts. I just want the audience to know, Roy actually asked me, is it okay? And I said, yes. We live in Arizona. It's 106 out. We often wear shorts to the office. So Greg, you're funny, but the truth is we want to keep rolling. We've got a lot more ground to cover. Roy, someone said something about why wouldn't you thread that shirt, even with the frame? Why wouldn't you thread the shirt so that you could raise that platen and get higher to the print head? Is that just preference?
No. The reason why I don't thread the shirt is 2 things. If I'm a silk screener, a lot of silk screeners are automatically, I'm going to thread my shirts, okay? Well, a silk screen press has a platen that sticks off of an arm. There is nothing underneath. I can easily slide the shirt over it. When I thread a shirt, what happens to the bottom? It gets bunched up where my platen height adjustment is. Okay, so I got to pull it all the way forward and start pulling it back to straighten it out. Okay, when I do that, it's still bound up. This back section here is bound up underneath. Getting the shirt to sit straight, especially if you're doing a large image, is a lot tougher, takes more time.
Gotcha.
So I don't ever thread my shirts unless I'm doing something unique or a sweatshirt. You have to thread your sweatshirts, but the material is thicker. It's easier to handle and manage and straighten out when you're actually loading it than a t-shirt is, because it's so flimsy. It will bunch up and it's harder to figure out where your center point is, especially if you're using a tubular shirt. You don't have a side seam, and now you're actually positioning is more relying on yourself and your skill level. Okay, if I keep my shirt doubled up, I followed my steps, it's going to be pressed, and that pressing is going to allow the shirt to lay flatter. Okay, and plus, again, it takes less time to load a shirt when I'm doing it just with the grip pad. I hit print and I'm done. That's how quickly I can load a shirt if I'm doing just the grip pad. Your voice is off.
Terry, for some reason we've lost your voice. Either you
about
muted
now?
yourself. Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Add to that for the rookies out there, it's so much easier to square that shirt up with the platen if you just lay it on top rather than try to thread it. A lot of folks think they have to thread the shirts because they see online all those screen printers who are in the habit of threading the shirts, but much easier to square that shirt up, especially if you're new to the industry, by just laying it on top.
Because you have this whole issue to deal with there.
So
Now, let's show you one of our platens. Now, our platen has a frame as well. People will ask about that, okay? So why do we have a frame on our platen, okay? Well, our platen loads differently than the Epson does, and it loads the same way as the grip pad. So if I go like this, pull the shirt back 1 inch, center the shirt. It is a little bit more slippery because of the aluminum. So that's how I tell people to do. Don't try to tuck the shirt in yet. That's a little premature. But we do have the rubber going around the outer perimeter. So when we're loading it, screws down. I basically just set this on and then give it one push, tuck it in, and then hit print. So instead of me doing one of these to flatten it or using the hockey puck, the platen itself pulls the garment in all 4 directions evenly with the same amount of pressure. So it's easier to load using our platen versus some of the other platens out there, or the Epson frame just in general.
And we'll have a little screen at the end. You can see some of the platens. At least one of my favorites is it's exclusive to us with the Hoodie platen, so that you can have the center that pops out and you can drop the zipper in the middle. But for those of you wondering, this isn't a commercial to sell the platens. This is just to let you know that there are a lot of variables out there. These are some of the things we have to consider when we're talking about sizing and alignment and placement of graphics. Roy, with the time permitted, I know I put you on the clock and it was about 15 minutes.
You did. You guys took up all the time, so now you're rushing me along.
No, we're not.
I'm just playing. So anyway, let me just finish this up.
I was going to say, Roy, I want you to take the time you need. This is important information, so I didn't want you to rush.
No, that's fine. The garment creator is a little easier to go through, so we'll cover that in a second. But mouse pads, I always tell people, go online, eBay, Amazon, and purchase a 10 or 20 pack of dye sublimatable mouse pads. Why these? They can withstand the heat. If I need to use them in the heat press, I can easily do that without hurting them. I can set them in here. Why would I need to do that? Again, I don't want to press my collars. sorry. Or if I have something small I want to do, say I got some onesies and someone just wants 50 of them, or that's all I've ever done. Am I going to go out and buy a Platen just for that, or 10 of them? No, I'm not. I can use mouse pads for specialty work until it makes sense for me to buy the proper Platen. Again, I think Terry had mentioned a lot of people buy the 1620 Platen. I think the most important Platen to have is the 10 by 12, along with the one that came with the machine. Okay, the 1620 you'll use less unless you're doing pillowcases or some type of tea towel or some specialty item that needs a bigger size. Most people aren't going to be using that Platen unless you focus on the big guy shirts and are printing 4 or 5X all the time. Then you may want that Platen. I can understand that. But most people don't fall into that niche. So again, if I have buttons to deal with, I don't want to press those. So this Platen or this mouse pad allows me, and if I buy the ones that are 1/4 inch thick, I don't have to worry about them moving because they got the rubber neoprene, and I can press this without messing up those buttons.
Without
Okay?
this, or without the seams pressing through from the back, so you don't get a crease
Exactly.
mark.
So same thing with small toddler shirts, or if you're doing some type of specialty printing. The reason why I say to get 10 of them is because you may want to cut some of them. Getting back to what Terry said, if I'm printing on a Docker style shirt, I can actually cut a mouse pad to fit in the pocket if I wanted to do something on the pocket itself. Okay? Or if I have my buttons, I could then position the mouse pad on the corner here. And again, using the garment creator and knowing my Platen positioning, it's all based on measurement, okay? Positioning. I know there's a 1/4 inch and a 1/4 inch margin, so I'm gonna add that to how far in it's gonna go. And then I can go to Garment Creator and pretty much place my artwork very easily just by doing that, okay? So if you see right here, this is right up at the edge, kind of centered almost on there. I can easily measure how far from the edge that I want it to be, okay? It's always good to have a shirt. I always tell customers, a ruined shirt is the best shirt to keep around because you can always reduce images, do test prints, or do mock-ups. Even if there's an image here, I can print over it for position. Just lower your ink volume on the amount that you're going to print, and you can still see your start and stop positions. Excuse me. And then when you're printing on either youth or toddler shirts, again, setting this in the center. So now I'm using my Platen from the center out, okay? And if I was going to do a onesie, I can throw that on there. Still allow for my 1 inch. People will say, well, why are you gonna do that? Well, I have these hard seams right here that I wanna get off the Platen because that's gonna cause an issue. Sorry about the glare. Let me see if I can reduce that.
There you go. That looks good.
So you could see these hard seams right here where they open up to stick the baby's body, the head through. You don't want that up on the Platen because that may infringe on your height position, okay? So I know my lowest point is going to be everywhere except my mouse pad area. So then, how far do I need to go down? Well, I can sit there and use my in and out button on my Platen here to find my position. And once I do, if I have to take a spacer out or whatever, I'm gonna make a note of that. Next time I use the mouse pad, I'm gonna go ahead and take out the black spacer. I'm gonna be at Platen height 4, okay? So let's just say hypothetically. All right, and then you have that for future notes. Everybody follows the same procedure. Then I have toddler shirts, depending on the size, or youth shirts. Again, can throw these on here just like I load a big shirt, pulling 1 inch down. Obviously, with that, I'm going to be higher up. And I mentioned, I think on our chart, we're about a 1/2 inch down for artwork on a youth size or a toddler size shirt. Okay. So that's another thing. As long as my art fits in there, if it doesn't and the shirt's wider, I can turn my mouse pad. This is where multiple mouse pads come into play. I can put another one on here or cut another one in half and butt it up to this one. I don't need to tape them down if I have the grip pad on. Because of the rubber, it's going to grab onto that and it's not going to move. Okay. So it's not like it's going to take a lot more production time to do that. Was there any questions in reference to what I just talked about?
I wanted to add a comment that if this is these tricks that Roy's showing you is if, say, for instance, toddler shirts are not your primary business and you get the occasional order. If you do toddler shirts all the time, by all means, buy a 7x8 Platen that you can use. But you know, people will call up and say, well, what size Platen do I need to do onesies on? And I normally say a 4x4, but then I always say, how many of these garments, infant garments, you're going to do? Well, just 6, because I'm doing a favor for a friend. Well, don't go out and buy a new Platen just to do 6 garments. So that you may never load on the machine again. Now, all these sizes of Platens are great to have, but if it's a one-off deal, use one of these tricks that Roy's sharing with you.
Completely agree with that.
All right, Roy, what's next? We've got you going into Garment Creator now.
Yep.
All right, folks.
So give me 1 second and I will go in and bring up
You're going to see
a
Roy
couple
switch.
of the images that I did. Did you give me sharing capability there?
I think I did. That's what I was just going to say. You should be able to switch screens, share your screen, and then we'll be able to see that. But let me know if you can't.
Okay, so got it. Everybody can see my screen?
Perfect.
Yes.
Great. Okay.
Well, I
so
can't speak for everybody, but I can see it.
Okay.
Well,
I can go to my layout here. So if you look at your layout settings, I can save as many as I'd like. Everybody starts out with the default. Okay. So if I change this right now, I have different ones set up. So I have my default. If I click on it, it's going to change the overall size of my print. Right now, it's not going to do anything because of the way it's set up. But if I click on Fit the Platen, it's going to go all the way. If you see these little, hold on 1 second. There we go. You see these little blue dots right here, all the way around? This is the page size that we were talking about. So this specific document was set up because it's a test file for us to just bring it in and fit Platen. Okay, so if you wanted to pre-position your artwork in Photoshop, Illustrator, CorelDRAW, any of the programs, you could easily use your program to do so. And that way there's no adjustment on the garment creator side. That's an option. Okay. The next option would be looking at this, knowing that I really want my blue dots right at the edge of my artwork. So let me show how I can achieve that. If I go ahead and look at this one, same thing. Okay, so this is the DTG Academy I printed. See, the blue dot is right up here at the edge because there's a margin again on this specific image. But if I went to these settings here, okay, back top logo is what I called this, okay? But you can see that my vertical position is at a minus 0.06. because of the blue dot. Now, if I were to go ahead and bring in this one, okay, this equipment zone, do you see the blue dots are right at the edge of the artwork? This is how you should be saving your artwork. So if I went back to the back top logo, it's putting my top edge of the logo right where the actual beyond the margin, it's going to cut that top of the image off. So again, I would want to bring that down at least probably about a half an inch at least. Okay, so I could do a 0.5 and it's going to bring it down there. And I can set up my width position. That's typically what I do. So I can do my width at 3.5 inches since it's a logo. Anywhere between 3 and, depending on whatever you're comfortable with, 3 and 4 inches is typically where I put my logos, depending on how big they are, wide versus being vertical. So anyway, I can go ahead and say I can save that as a new setting. The reason why I put 1416 to start with is because all of these templates are based on the 1416 Platen. If it were on the 1620, I'd put 1620 in front of it. That's why I know which Platen I need to put on there in order to use that specific setup. Now I can do that as save it as new, or if I just modified this, I can go ahead and just overwrite my personal settings that I already had. And now if I go to left chest logo and back of the shirt on the top, it's going to bring it in right at the width, right at the position that I had before. Here, it's going to do my positioning on the front chest. Okay.
Roy, can I jump in just for a second to make sure I'm
Sure.
getting this? So I understand the idea of what you're saying with a preset, and you're doing the horizontal and vertical positioning and you predetermine the width. Is it correct that once you have that preset and that placement dialed in, then the next time I go to import, say, a different version of the Equipment Zone logo, it's going to automatically drop them in those locations if I choose the preset?
Let me show you. Just 1 second. In reference to what you just said.
The curiosity's killing us.
Okay, so this specific logo is too small. So hold on 1 sec. Okay. So do you see the position is right where that's at right now? Okay. So if I do my back
Okay.
top logo,
Yep. Gotcha.
then I can go back to my, because I brought it in that way. Hold on 1 sec. So typically what it should be doing, if I just brought it under default first and changed it, it should have just changed it to what I had it set at, if that makes sense. So if I go up here to the back top logo, okay,
Yep.
It's not changing the width, but it is changing the position, if that makes sense.
Yeah, gotcha. That was my question.
It's getting close in proportion, but it's not exact. So depending on the logo, some of the widths, as I mentioned, are going to change. So basically you can decide at that point where I want that to be as far as width, but your positioning was going to stay the same. So if I do this 1.5 inches down, 10 inches wide, it's going to start me there, okay? But it's a little short. It's still 1.5 inches down, but if I want to be right at 10 inches on this design, or say I want to be at 11 inches, you know, you can go in, and again, this blue dot is based on my sizing. So the blue dot should be at the edge of my artwork. So this one isn't saved correctly, although it isn't even a transparent background. This is an example of what not to do, okay, versus your image. So if I had everything where it needed to be, if I go back here, okay, to this 378 is ensuring my logo is typically right about 3.5 inches still, because the area is a little bit bigger, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. So
Okay.
what you're trying to describe, I just want to make sure I'm getting it too. This is an advantage to avoid future misprints. If you can use these presets and label them the way you just did, um, then I can use those again and again and again without having to fiddle through it this whole time, right? Like once I've done that work, save that setting. That's the point, isn't it? That's the
Yeah, that's the
advantage of having.
point. If you
Okay.
like the way it's positioning, then that is the point. Yes. The last thing you want to figure out, though, is based on my position here, okay, is if it's changing it a little bit, is it because my blue dots aren't where they're supposed to be? Okay. Uh, because if you go from one that is saved correctly, it's really not going to change the artwork like it does on this one. It's going to stay pretty consistent, if that makes sense. And again, you just go in and fine tune where you're at, but at least you're in the ballpark. You're right there. I mean, you're in the game.
Right.
You just
Exactly.
have to kind of fine tune where you're going to be. And again, if you're finding that it's off a little bit, I can easily go in and fine tune it. And then I can come back here and just right click on it and overwrite it.
And one more
Okay.
question, Roy, just to be clear, the example or the image of the black T-shirt in the background, that's just for that's just a help. That's an aid. That's not the exact placement. The grid
No, because if
within.
you look at how far the collar is right
Yeah.
here, I
Okay.
mean, we're
Okay.
already talking
That's what I
almost
thought.
4 inches
I
from
just
the collar. There's
I
no
just didn't want
way.
anyone. I didn't want anyone who sees that to get fooled that that's where.
Yeah, if you wanted to remove that, that's fine.
No, that wasn't my point. I just wanted to make sure that people don't get misinformation or contradicting information based on what you and Terry said earlier about the left chest or right chest image
Yeah,
placement.
don't the shirt is there for looks only. It is
Gotcha.
not there to be used. Now, another thing is, let's say for instance, I'm printing a design on a brown shirt and you're in dark garment mode. Well, there's where, yeah, I want to change the color of the shirt, and I can easily do that by going to view background color and say, okay, I'm going on a brown shirt. Okay, and I can change this to a brown shirt.
Right. That's
That
another.
way I'm able to see black lines or a black design on a different color shirt other than black, because your defaults are black. And then under print settings, you have the same option. I can save as many as I'd like. I could do black colored t-shirt, use garment black. Obviously, you're not going to want to be in that mode. You want to be in dark colored shirt mode, but you could save this as dark colored shirt brown standard and go ahead and save that based on a default. Okay.
And it
And
just
that way,
becomes another future print preset. Is that right?
exactly, you can have as many as you want. So if I have my dual sleeve platen, this is how we import the platens. And then I have my layouts based on that. Okay. So that's my 1620 dual sleeve platen. So you can have as many as you'd like. So if I'm using garment black or doing standard, um, shoes, if I'm doing shoes, whatever Platens you have, you can save as many of these settings in here as you'd like. I've seen people have 50, 60 settings in here and really utilize Garment Creator's ability to take a lot of the guesswork out of placement. Okay, but at least you have the chart. Again, the numbers are reference. The thing to keep in mind, and this is the way I look at things, the bigger the artwork is as far as size, the more it's going to cost to print. So if it's smaller, I could go 11 inches. Let's just take an image, for instance, here. Let me just go back to a standard setting. So you get all this other stuff out of here. So if I'm going to print this, let's just say I'm going to go centered and then just go to top center, and I'm going to print this 1.5 inches down, and I'm going to make this 11.5 inches wide. Okay, that's about the size that I would print max on this on a large adult shirt. But if it were an image that were maybe 15 inches long, my costs will soar. Okay, and an inch difference can almost be a 60 to 80 cent difference in ink cost. So I could go down here to 10 inches and save me money if it were a much bigger image that I'm printing, like something vertical. Okay, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, totally.
So this is more of a landscape I would consider versus a portrait type image. The more solid the print is as far as how much shirt it covers, that's where the cost comes into play. If it's something that's open, then there's going to be a lot less issue with cost. Okay, so if I were to bring something in like just 1 second.
The famous geckos.
Yep.
We got to give credit to our friend Dane Clement at Great Dane Graphics. Those are really cool designs, though.
So if I take this and I just hit maximize Platen, because this was defaulted for a image to print at shows. So there was no guesswork. We printed everyone the same. Everybody printed them the same. And this is the same thing as I mentioned before. If you want to control it at the graphics program level, by all means, you can do that. Just using a grid line for placement and then positioning your shirts on the Platens accordingly. As I mentioned, everybody do it the same exact way depending on the style of the shirt. Okay, but I can still increase the size of this if I wanted to. And then go back to my center here. And this right here, even though it's this big, would not cost me that much more in ink than if it were something that were solid, okay, right. As far as an print area, because there's all this open space.
Okay. I mean, you would still save some money, but it's not as dramatic is what your point is.
Exactly. It's going to be what, a 10, 15 cent difference between or versus maybe a 60 to $1 difference if I increased it on a full-fledged flood image. And that's basically everything, unless anybody had any questions that you guys wanted to cover.
No, I think we've reached the point where we better wrap it up. We're about a 90-minute webinar here, which is great. It's okay. We never know if these are going to be 45 minutes or an hour or a little bit more. It's based on the content, some of the feedback that we've been given, and also the questions that we get. So, Terry, was there anything that you want to wrap us up with before we turn this off and say goodbye to all the folks?
Well, I will just say, like I always say, experiment, experiment, experiment. And just like you had said, Jay, save some of those experiments so you can show your customers about where placement's going to be.
Yeah, test, test, test. I hear Roy talk about it all the time in trainings. to go through this and to spend a half a day, practice on an infant, practice on a toddler, practice on youth, practice on adult.
Their shirts, not on them.
Oh, not exactly. On the garments, not the people. Which is great. And again, I want to reemphasize that everybody can reach out to either Jeff Baxter, Terry Combs, or Amy Krulowitz. And if you already have Roy's email, you're welcome to reach out to Roy. But the three of you really have the control over this and can give more insight, more feedback, and then let them have a copy. And that would be a great way if they have any additional questions, they can reach you too. We'll make sure that Jeff and Amy get this as soon as our webinar is done. Somebody referenced about the Platens, where they go to get the Platens. Of course, we want you to go to us. We do have some that are exclusive to us. This is one of our favorites. Roy, you held up a really cool hoodie earlier, and we didn't give you any time to talk about it, but he uses these Platens to be able to print right over the zipper seams. And the resolution and the ease in which these work are amazing. So shout out to the engineers and Harry and all the folks in New Jersey, and probably some input from Roy too that made this possible. Couple of questions came up about where do they go to see our YouTube channel. Go to YouTube, go up to search, Equipment Zone, and look for this graphic, and that's where you'll see literally hundreds of videos. Some are not 90 minutes, many are 30 minutes. Depends on the topic, depends on the printer. We do have some sublimation topics, some heat press topics. Most of the content is geared towards direct-to-garment printing because that's what we're known for. But we do have some great interviews. I'm a big fan of the interview we did with you and Marshall and Jeff Baxter. I thought that was an amazing interview where we talked about when is the right time to add digital garment printing. One of my favorites. I'm a little biased, but I also really appreciate what Roy said earlier. And we do have and have started scripting out shorter blocks of webinars that are going to be like a tech talk instead of a TED talk. It's going to be the Equipment Zone Tech Talk, where Roy's going to just break down one topic, one issue. Like, we're going to look at one problem and say, what could have caused this problem, what to look for, and what to probably change or fix. And those will hopefully all be under 20 minutes. We're going to try to keep them to 15 to 20 minutes if that's possible. Anytime you include Roy or myself in a webinar, you know that might not be possible. However, the content is worth it. The content is gold, and the troubleshooting and the challenges that people go through sometimes are unknown. You don't know what you don't know, and you buy this printer, and even if you spent 4 hours with Roy and he trained you very well, you get out there in the wild, you start printing, and new things pop up, things you didn't think to ask, things you didn't experience. So that's why this can be a great resource for everybody. Please subscribe to this channel, because what will happen is every time we upload a video or update information, you get a notification that there's new things there, there's new information. And then this is the key contact info. So we want to make sure everybody sees Terry's email, Jeff's email, and Amy's email. That's really all I had, guys, unless there's something else, Roy, you want to close with.
Well, someone also asked about our Facebook group.
Oh, right. That's right. Yeah, they did. So the specific Facebook group, I always mess it up. I want to call it what it is. So I'm actually pulling up my phone here so we can get to the right group. It is called the Epson F2100 DTG Users Group. You can see it right here, the F21. So if you see those sneakers, you found the right spot. That's the skateboard, which is right behind me, by the way. And those are all printed here with former folks that used to work here, and Roy and Terry and Jeff and so on and so forth. So please join us. We have over 1,200 members now, the Epson F2100 DTG Users Group.
And we could have a lot more members, but as Jay mentioned, we keep it to the local US only, mainly for language and time zone. I know there's some people that say, well, we're in the same time zones because we're in Canada or South America. Well, there is a language barrier and also a shipping barrier. If they want to buy products that we recommend here in the States, may not be available in other countries. So that's something we also want to keep in mind when we allow people in the group.
Excellent point. Well, that's all we have for today. We want to thank again our special guest, Terry Combs, Roy Huseman, for the time that everybody's taken. And I'm Jay Bassell, happy to be here to moderate. Thank goodness these two are here because they have most of the answers. And I'm pretty much just here to show off cool tie-dye prints.
Perfect.
All right. Well, we'll be on another webinar soon. Talk to you then. Until then, be
Bye,
safe.
everybody.
All right.